So far you've seen the ICRFS-Plus relational database that can be created very easily, can be populated very easily using COM technology, irrespective of where your current data is warehoused. And now we want to talk a little bit about modeling the data, paradigm shifts, benefits, variability, what are all the benefits and advantages of this new paradigm shift. Now, in terms of modeling the data, we have a number of modeling frameworks. The first one, which you are familiar with, which is standard actuarial practice, is link ratio techniques, Bornhutter-Ferguson, and expected loss ratio. Now, it turns out that a link ratio, or development factor, H-to-H factor, is one number divided by another number. So it turns out that a ratio is just a trend between a number pair and the origin. Therefore, an average ratio is an average trend. But you know, you can estimate average trends by using a ruler for graph on graph paper, or you could just do what's called least squares. The extended link ratio family modeling framework, and I emphasize modeling framework, it's a whole family of models. The extended link ratio family, first of all, formulates, in the first instance, formulates link ratios or average link ratios as regression estimators. So we calculate average ratios in a regression framework, and as a result of that, we instantly, within milliseconds, get a lot of more information. It's also extended to include an intercept, because a standard average ratio, whether it's volume-weighted average or arithmetic average or average without high, low, whatever average you like, or average of the last 3 years, is always an average trend for the origin. So we extend this to also include an intercept, and also another component of interest, modeling component of interest, which is a constant trend in every development period going down the accident years. So the extended link ratio family tells you very quickly whether ratios work for your data. What do I mean by that? Data has certain features, and the model is supposed to describe those features. A model is essentially a short story about the volatility in the numbers. Now, if the model has features that are not contained in the data, and vice versa, if the data have features that are not contained in the model, well, the model is pretty useless. So the extended link ratio family will typically tell you that ratios do not capture the features in the data and might lack predictive power. And will also guide you to what we call the probabilistic trend family, which is also a modeling framework. In the probabilistic trending family modeling framework, what you're trying to do is design, build, or create a model which represents a short story. It's a summary of the features, which is the volatility in your triangle. And of course, you test that the assumptions in the model, the features in the model, correspond to the features in the data. You build a model. If you like, in actual parlance, what you're actually doing is creating a method which is most appropriate for that particular triangle, whether it be case reserve estimates, whether it be paid losses, or whether it be some kind of count triangle. So in the probabilistic trend family, you create a model where you in fact fit a distribution to every cell in the triangle, and you project distributions into the future. The model assumptions are explicit. The model will be represented by, just got an email there, I should have turned my emails off. The models are represented by 4 pictures. They make explicit assumptions. Those assumptions are clear, and it's very easy to do peer review. The MPTF actually applies to multiple triangles. This is modeling the volatility within each triangle and the relationship between triangles, and that has many applications that we will discuss in subsequent videos. There's a paradigm shift from this side to this side. What do we mean by paradigm shift? So I'm going to go to our website and go to paradigm. Let's assume that. Okay. A paradigm is a new framework. It's a framework. It's a frame of reference. It's a new way of thinking about a particular problem or particular issues. It's a breakaway from traditional thought. And as a result of this paradigm shift from the link ratio techniques to the probabilistic trend-family modeling framework, and then the multiple probabilistic trend-family modeling framework, you find out things that you didn't know before, completely new things. You find out new applications, you find new benefits, and you start seeing the world very differently in terms of measuring risks and relating risks. You also find out that a lot of the things that have become folklore in terms of link ratios are not really true, are just not really true. Now, there's a paper called Best Estimates for Reserves. It is on the CIS syllabus of examinations, and some of the things done in the paper are actually going to be done using the data. We're going to do a lot of things that are done in the paper we're going to do with the system in subsequent presentations. Now, there's a lot of misconceptions and misunderstanding in the actual literature and amongst actuaries, and I think a lot of that has come as a result of this particular flawed paradigm. And one of them has to do with variability. So let's discuss variability and uncertainty. Variability and uncertainty are two distinct concepts. They are related, but they are distinct concepts. So let's look at what Sir David Cox, perhaps the world's foremost statistician, says about variability and uncertainty. Variability is a phenomena in the physical world to be measured, analyzed, and where appropriately explained. By contrast, uncertainty is an aspect of knowledge. By contrast, there is a contrast. Variability is a phenomena in nature. We can measure it, sometimes possibly explain it. It's very rare that we actually control it. By contrast, uncertainty is an aspect of knowledge. And let's illustrate this with two gambling examples. In fact, gambling examples were used to create ideas in probability theory. A lot of the ideas in probability theory were explained in terms of simple gambling models. So let's suppose we have a coin that we're going to toss 100 times, and it's a fair coin, it's a symmetric coin. The probability of observing a head or a tail is a half. The mean of the number of heads observed in 100 tosses is exactly 50, and I have no doubt about it. I'm not uncertain about it. The standard deviation is exactly 5. My confidence interval for the mean is 50 to 50 with 100% probability. I know the probability of each outcome, 0, 1, 2, 3, up to 100. I know each probability. I know all the binomial probabilities. Therefore, I know the distribution exactly. I have no uncertainty in the distribution. I have no uncertainty in the mean. I have no uncertainty in the standard deviation being 5. If I wanted to create a 95% prediction interval, a 95% prediction interval for the number of heads, when I toss the coin 100 times, 40 to 60 is approximately a 95% prediction interval for the outcome when I toss the coin 100 times. I cannot make this prediction interval 40 to 60 shorter. If I decrease the length of the prediction interval, then it will no longer be 95%. And that's because of the inherent variability in the coin, and that inherent variability is called process variability. In this particular example, I know the process variability exactly, and the prediction interval refers to an interval for random outcome. A confidence interval is for a parameter which is a constant. A prediction interval is for a random interval. So there's a distinction also between a prediction interval and a confidence interval. One is for a random outcome, one is for a parameter which is fixed. Now, let's go to a roulette wheel. Suppose a roulette wheel is numbered 0 to 100. Again, it's a symmetric wheel, so each probability of any outcome, 0 to 100, is 1 on 101. I know the mean is 50 exactly. So both processes have a mean of 50. So if I only tell you the mean, am I giving you enough information to evaluate the risk? And of course the answer is strongly in the negative. For the roulette wheel, the standard deviation is 29. The confidence interval for the mean is 50 to 50, still with 100%. Of course, the roulette wheel has much more volatility. The roulette wheel requires much more risk capital. I'm only going to turn the wheel once. I'm going to turn the coin 100 times and observe the outcome. For the roulette wheel, if I want to design a 95% prediction interval, well, it's got to be pretty wide. It's going to be something like 2 to 97 is a possible, well actually that would be a symmetric, almost a symmetric prediction interval. I can't make that interval any smaller. If I do make that prediction interval any smaller, it will be less than 95% prediction interval. So of course it's very important to know not just the mean, but also the total variability before you could decide how much risk capital you need for that particular game. And it's exactly the same in insurance. In loss reserving, the loss reserve is a random variable. It's the actual loss reserve, the outcome of the loss reserve, which will be fixed, will be a realization from that random variable. And therefore, we need to create the distribution of this random variable, of the loss reserve. And that distribution has to come from the data, not one that you make up. And it has to be explained in terms of the data. And also, you need to write down all your assumptions very clearly and as to how, what assumptions you made to create that distribution. Those assumptions should be explicit. Let's introduce a little bit of uncertainty. Remember, variability cannot be controlled but can be measured. I can introduce uncertainty in the coin, for example. Suppose the coin is mutilated. I don't know that the probability of a head coming up is a half. However, what we let you do is toss the coin 10 times before we conduct the experiment of tossing it 100 times. And when you toss it 10 times, by chance you observe 50 heads. Now, your estimate of the probability of a head, your estimate of P, is now 0.5. But it's only an estimate. You have an uncertainty associated with it. The true probability of a head might be 0.56. It might be 0.45. We don't know. Now, your estimate of the mean when you toss it 100 times is 50. That is your estimate of the mean. But it's only an estimate and you don't know it exactly. Now you can create a confidence interval around that estimate. If I now want to create a prediction interval, which is 95%, can you now imagine it's going to be wider than 40 to 60? It might be 35 to 65. And the reason for that is because if the true probability of the head is 0.55, then the interval will be further to the right. If in fact the true probability is 0.45, the interval will be to the left. So the parameter uncertainty introduces it makes the prediction interval wider. So now we have an uncertainty associated with the distribution of the number of heads because we don't know the true probability. So we have an uncertainty about our knowledge of the variability in the coin. In the first example, where we knew the true probability being 0.5, there was no uncertainty associated in our knowledge about the variability. We understood the variability, we knew the variability exactly. We had an exact measure of the variability. In the second example, we don't have an exact measure of the variability, we have an uncertainty associated with it. And it would be the same with the roulette wheel if it were mutilated. Now let's suppose you use the coin model for the roulette wheel. Would you be making any mistakes? You would. Huge mistakes in terms of how much capital you require. What if the roulette wheel was numbered 0 to 200 and it was a symmetric wheel? Would you be making any mistakes when you use the coin model for the roulette wheel? You'd get the mean completely wrong and the volatility completely wrong. Well, that's exactly what happens here. The extended link ratio family tells you how wrong you go when you use link ratios. What is it in the link ratios that's not in the data? Is your answer Y too large? Is your answer Y too small? Or is your answer completely meaningless? And in association with the probabilistic trend family, you can find out that you can get answers here that give you completely false indication of what's going on in the business. Remember, if you're going to measure risk capital or economic capital, or you're going to be supporting something like Solvency II, you need to understand the volatility in your data, and you need to be able to project that volatility. Very important. Just like it is important with the coin, it's basic. It is basic concepts. Okay, there's a paradigm shift. That means that you have a breakaway from traditional ways of thinking about the problem. So, we find out, for instance, that no two companies are the same. No two companies necessarily have the same trends, and no two companies have the same process variability. And we're going to illustrate this because we've got access to AM Best Schedule P in a relational database. Before, in video 1, I showed you what a relational database looks like. The AM Best database looks like that. Company name, every company, line of business, and so on. No company is the same as the industry. No company has the same trends as the industry, unless it is the industry, and no company has the same process variability as the industry. Just imagine all the advantages to be had that you would afford when you have ICRFS-Plus. You've got access, if you've bought the AM Best Schedule PCD, easily convertible to a relational database. You can compare companies using a modeling wizard in a matter of minutes. You can compare them to the industry in a matter of minutes. A wealth, a lot of information that you couldn't have got in any other way. There are myths about total reserve upgrades. There are myths about uncertainty and variability. And you can see a lot of this when people talk about ranges. A range in statistics, if you're looking at a range of population, it's the maximum minus the minimum. If you're looking at a range of a sample, it's the maximum minus the minimum. In statistics, for a parameter, we have a confidence interval, and for a random variable, we have what we call prediction intervals. Prediction intervals include parameter uncertainty and process variability. The benefits, advantages of this paradigm shift. First of all, you've got comp technology to automate a lot of the processes, from data input to modeling to monitoring and updating to report writing, and all the way to sending any output, any ICRFS output in any format you like into any other COM-enabled software. You've got the benefits of a relational database. You can design the database in any way, and that database has all the information you need, and you can access it just with a few mouse clicks. You can create a company-wide report. So if you've got 50 line of business, you can create a company-wide report, a template that will give you the distributions of loss reserves by calendar year, accident year for each line of business and the aggregate. You'll also have all the correlations, and you can also automate these reports using COM automation. You've got access, if you've got the AIM Best CD or the NIC Schedule P CD, these are easily convertible. We provide you with the COM script. It can be done all overnight, and you've got access to a lot of information. If you are an insurance company and you're looking at pricing or ceding some risk with a reinsurer, you can find out pretty quickly and monitor their reserves, their net reserves, find out if you feel that perhaps they're under-reserved. Do you want to deal with a reinsurance company that is under-reserved? Well, you can actually reduce your credit risk very quickly by finding out what your insurer is up to. You've got a modeling wizard to model data. You can do it manually. That's also pretty fast. You can model gross versus net of reinsurance data and find out very quickly whether the current reinsurance program, outward reinsurance program that the company has in place, is it capitally efficient? Is the net of reinsurance reserves have a coefficient of variation less than the gross reserves? Very often the answer is in the negative. You can model case reserves, paid losses, and see which is leading, which is lagging, and we'll show you one example in a subsequent video where you'll be able to tell me by looking at two pictures and comparing them. You'll be able to tell me in a matter of about 30 seconds when this particular company was sold or was purchased. Monitoring and updating. Once you have a model to year-end 2006, there's no need for a new model at the next evaluation period. You already have one. You just update the whole database, including the triangle groups and models, and just do the monitoring. Diversification between lines of business, capital allocation by line of business, which is based on the true volatility in your data and the true relationships between your lines of business measured from the data. And all the models are making explicit assumptions that you can explain to somebody else. Peer review is also a great advantage. There's a clear audit trail. Credibility modeling, pricing future underwriting years, optimal outgoing reinsurance. You can design that also, both, if you like, retrospectively, prospectively, or the combination of both. You can price high severity, low frequency data, both retrospectively and prospectively. You can have uneven sampling periods, which I already indicated in video 1. The accident years might be years, and the quarterly, the calendar periods could be quarterly or could be monthly, and so on. And this would be also important not just in terms of how often you do evaluations in respect of 12 months, say, reserving periods, but it might be also important for short tail. So you might be looking at something which is short tail. The accident periods could be quarter years, but the development periods might be months. So the system also has application to short tails lines of business. Some real-life examples that we look at Workers' Comp California, where companies have lost a lot of money in the late 90s, in the early 2000s, and yet we're going to see that some companies just had a huge trend for a long period of time. So there seems to be quite a bit of evidence that they didn't know about this particular trend, and we're going to relate this to some loss reserving myth. We're going to show you a company which is called Frontier. It was shut down by the New York Insurance Commissioner in the late 90s, but yet in the previous, say, 4 or 5 years, the trend was the same. We've mentioned cases of estimates versus paid losses versus incurred, and find out that the incurred don't tell you anything about what's going on in the data. That's when you use ratios and why ratios don't work. But when you model the paids and the case estimates separately, you extract a lot of information in a matter of seconds, and you can relate the two. No company is the same as the industry. Company A is a company. It doesn't have the same as process variability in the industry, and it doesn't even have the same trends as the industry. Net of reinsurance versus gross, we've mentioned that. We're going to look at some real-life examples. Sometimes link ratios can give you answers that are too high. Sometimes link ratios can give you answers that are too low. So we'll look at one specific example where the answers are much too high, and you'll be able to tell that in a matter of seconds. We're going to look at examples, real-life examples, where we allocate capital by line of business, and we measure the volatility in each line and the two types of correlations between them. There are two types of correlations, and what's called process correlation and parameter correlation. We'll also look at an example where we price high severity, low frequency data, both prospectively and retrospectively. And we're going to also look at examples where we import data. I think that's video chapters. I think chapter 4 has a number of sections where we actually import data, create triangles from unit record data and import them, and also triangles from Excel spreadsheets or MS Access databases and so on. There are unique benefits afforded by the paradigm shift, many benefits that you will not find elsewhere. In PTF, because we model distributions in the past, we forecast distributions in the future, that allows us to do reinsurance, adverse development cover. There are quite a few reinsurers that use the system mainly for pricing reinsurance deals. 3 based in Bermuda. There's at least 2 or 3 that are used to be in Bermuda but no longer write this kind of business in Bermuda, but they use the system for modeling adverse development cover retrospectively, prospectively, or excess of loss pricing on individual losses, high severity, low frequency. There's a module that once you have actually forecast the distributions for every cell, these are log normal distributions that are correlated. Of course, everything has been tested. You can simulate from these log normals at warp speed to find distributions of aggregates by calendar year, accident year, and the aggregate. Capital allocation by line of business. The MPTF applies to multiple triangles, like multiple lines, segments, layers, different types of correlations, credibility modeling. But I think a great advantage of this product and benefit is you get the pleasure of finding things out that you didn't know before. And I'd like to stress again, in terms of economic capital, in terms of how much capital you need to understand the volatility in each line and the interrelationships between the lines of business. And a lot of the standard techniques and a lot of the way this is done currently is actually flawed. For instance, some people use 25 different methods on the data, and the 25 different answers they fit a distribution to those 25 answers. This has nothing, absolutely statistically nothing, to do with the volatility in the data. It's just the volatility in your methods, and most of those methods aren't appropriate anyway. So the only way to measure the volatility in the data is to find a model that actually captures that volatility, and you'll see later on in subsequent videos how we actually test that the volatility in the model, explained by the model, the features in the model, is the same as the volatility in the data, and you cannot distinguish between the two. So there's a lot of videos to come, there's a lot of examples to come, and there's a lot of explanation still to be given, and I'm pretty sure you're going to find this very exciting and very enjoyable. Thank you.